New York Giants left tackle Andrew Thomas lands on PUP to start training camp. Why I'm not concerned about that just yet, that's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, welcome on into our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, Giant fans, on today's program, the big news came down. Left tackle Andrew Thomas is going to be starting training camp on PUP. I'm going to explain what that is, why I'm not concerned with that news as of right now, despite what we know about Andrew Thomas's recent history with injuries. So we'll tackle that topic first. Then for the rest of the show, my special guest is NFL Network reporter Judy Batista. So we talked about the Giants training camp, what success is going to look like, all kinds of topics. So that will follow after this first segment. So again, welcome on into everybody. Let's get into it. All right. The Giants announcing that Andrew Thomas, one of two people to land on PUP, the other one being running back Eric Gray, who, I'll talk about that briefly at the end here, but Andrew Thomas is the big story. So Andrew Thomas lands on PUP. Now, if I'm being totally honest with you guys and gals, I'm not surprised. Okay, Andrew Thomas was held out of practice during the spring. The idea being to make sure that his foot is as close as possible to being ready by the time we get to week 1. All right, so I kind of expected, especially with the fact that they kind of know what they have in Andrew Thomas, the fact that the first week or so training camp is padless practices. And, it's important reps, don't get me wrong, but really you want to be ready for the padded part of practice. So the fact that Andrew Thomas is potentially going to miss maybe the first week or so of training camp, not a big deal. Now, let me just back up a little bit and explain the differences between PUP during training camp and PUP during the season, because a lot of people get this mixed up. All right, when a player is put on PUP, he is considered active PUP. What that means is he counts against the 90-man training camp roster. All right, now if he lands on PUP to start the season, he then becomes inactive PUP, which means that he does not count against the 53-man roster. Now, the big difference here is that when you are active PUP, you can come off a PUP anytime you are able to pass a physical. That's what PUP basically is. If you land on PUP, that means you were not able to pass a physical. All right. So Andrew Thomas can basically come off PUP anytime during the summer and just get ramped up and ready to go. All right. Now, if he were on PUP to start the season, he would have to wait. I believe it's 4 weeks now. He would have to wait before he could come back and his 21-day window open. The Giants, I think, are hoping not to get to that point. All right. So where we stand with Andrew Thomas, it is conceivable that they are going to give him as much time as possible. All right. Ideally, you'd like to see Thomas out there. But here's the thing, folks, and I kind of talked about this a little bit on yesterday's program with Ed Valentine. The Giants in the beginning of camp are probably going to play around with some different offensive line combinations. They're also going to need to find out what they have at left tackle with, is it going to be Stone Forsythe, or is it going to be James Hudson the third, or is it going to be somebody else? So really the early part of training camp is the time when you kind of play around with different lineups and looks and stuff like that. Now, for the offensive line and any position for that matter, to me, it's important that by the time you get to maybe preseason week 3, or even before that, I would say by preseason week 3, actually, it's important that you start to make decisions as to what your starting group is going to look like, especially on that offensive line. The last thing you want to have happen is that you go into week 1 and your starting offensive line has not played together. We have seen that happen. We saw that happen last year. Now, last year, it just so happened that starting offensive line, they did pretty well. They weren't the all-time greatest offensive line I've ever seen the Giants put on the field, but they were solid compared to what they had in previous years. So I believe the plan for Andrew Thomas is that at some point before training camp ends, he will get on the field. And I think if I had to take a guess, it would be before the week 3 game. We will not see Andrew Thomas play, even if he gets back on the field and is able to pass a physical. We will not see him play in the preseason. The goal is to get him on the field for week 1, because I don't have to tell you guys know the schedule by now. Those first 2 games are against NFC East opponents. They are on the road. They are very difficult games. The Giants cannot afford to come out of the chute 0-2 in those games. And if they're going to give themselves the best possible chance of succeeding in those games, they're going to need Andrew Thomas on the field. So if it means sacrificing him, for training camp and keeping him on the side, then so be it. Now, if Andrew Thomas is still on PUP come week 3 of the preseason, then I might start to get a little worried. All right, because you want to make sure that he gets at least a week to 10 days to get back on the field, to get into football shape, because you're not going to get into football shape if you're standing on the sideline. You got to get hit. You got to hit people, so that's going to be the biggest thing. And I think the Giants are going to try and leave him as much time as possible to get into football shape. All right. So this is just my guess, folks, based on logic. But I think that if Andrew Thomas is on the field before the week leading up to the 3rd and final preseason game, I think we'll be okay with the offensive line. So, bottom line, and maybe you guys will agree with me, maybe you won't, but as far as I'm concerned, if sacrificing some training camp practices for Andrew Thomas means that he will be 100%, no questions asked, ready to go come week 1, I'll take that. I won't fret over that. Okay. Because it was kind of how it was trending based on what was going on in the spring and what leading up to the summer. So Andrew Thomas at some point will come off PUP. It's just a matter of when and how much time they want to allow him to. So that's something just to keep in mind for those of you who are maybe panicking and saying, oh my God, the season's over and we haven't even had our first training camp practice, which, by the way, is today. If you're watching this show on Wednesday, the first training camp practice is today. So that's the story with Andrew Thomas. Now, just real quick, Eric Gray, running back, was the other Giant placed on PUP. Eric Gray, his roster spot, if I'm being honest with you, probably shaky to begin with. So, this doesn't exactly help his case. All right. I don't know exactly what his injury is or how long he might be sidelined, but starting on PUP does not help his case when there's competition there at the bottom of that depth chart for running back. All right. And then the other notable transactions made by the Giants, as they reported to camp on Tuesday, you had Anthony Johnson Jr. was waived, injured. Okay. He had he was waived with a failed physical designation. He had the shoulder injury and he wasn't able to practice all spring. So the Giants signed veteran safety Kavon Wallace, a guy they had worked out basically, I think it was during the mini camp. They had worked him out. So he came in, and as soon as I saw that signing, I knew, kind of had a feeling that somebody on the safety group wasn't going to make it. And I figured it might be Johnson, which is a real shame. I thought maybe he might have a chance, but the injury just got in the way. Okay. And the other injury designation to start camp, outside linebacker, Victor Demukije, guy who probably didn't have a chance of making this roster given the depth now that the team has at outside linebacker. he was placed on the non-football injury list. Victor, of course, unfortunately tore his pectoral back in May. So that's being treated as a non-football injury. Since it happened in the weight room, he's going to start on NFI. So, I just don't think he would have made the roster anyway, but because he's injured, he's got to get that injury designation. So that's where we stand on the opening day of training camp. All right. The team is on the field on Wednesday. So, we'll have practice reports, but just a couple quick things before we get to our first break here. The good news is Bobby Okereke and Malik Neighbors, Chris Manhertz, guys that missed practice during the spring, Cam Scadaboo, who missed practice, Darius Alexander, who missed practice, all of those guys passed their physicals. They will participate in some way, shape, or form. Now, we'll probably find out who's going to practice fully, who's going to be limited, have his workload managed. But overall, right now, the injury situation, not that bad, despite the fact that Andrew Thomas is on PUP. So that's a rundown of where we stand as of the first day of training camp. The Giants reporting today. Again, practice tomorrow. All right. So coming up next, my interview with NFL Network reporter Judy Batista. Don't go anywhere. I'll have that for you right after this. Hey, Giant fans, ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. With Monarch Money, I've been able to get a complete glance at my household spending all in one easy-to-use app. This helps with budgeting and planning, not just for the upcoming week, but also for the short and long-term savings. Take control of your finance with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com to get 50% off your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com, and that promo code is LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
This episode is brought to you by Rougiette. I know that you've probably heard of Viagra and Cialis, maybe even tried them, but if you're looking for something that goes beyond the usual pill, then it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Their 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue, kicks in fast, on average in about 15 minutes, while some of those usual pills can take up to hours, and the effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can always stay confident in control when the moment is right. And it's all completely online. You can read real customer reviews on their website, and over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Just head over to Rougiette.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information.
All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And coming up in these next two segments, my interview with Judy Batista of the NFL Network. Before we get into that, just again, a reminder, Giants' first practice is on Wednesday. I will have camp reports for you. If there's a practice, you'll get a report. Of course, we will also have coverage for you over on New York Giants Honest. I hope you will check that out. All right, let's get into it. Here is my interview with NFL Network's Judy Batista. The Giants are in training camp. We have finally made it. And what better way to kick things off than to have this next guest of mine, Judy Batista. She's someone who I've known for a long time. She is an NFL Network insider who is going to be part of the NFL Network's live coverage of Back Together Weekend, which starts this Saturday and Sunday, and inside the training camp coverage, July 28th through August 6th. Judy, my friend, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back to football. I'm out at the Giants on Sunday when they're on the field, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, so we'll definitely see you there. And
absolutely.
Judy, a lot to talk about with this Giant team. I mean, the roster's such a changeover from last year. And I want to kind of go back to last year just a little bit. Did you think in watching that team, I mean, outside of the quarterback situation, we know that wasn't really an ideal situation, but there's been a debate as to whether that's what really held the team back or was there other factors? Because, again, they made over the quarterback room, but they also added a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. And I just want to get your take as to what you saw and what you thought of the Giants, from last year to this year.
I think it was all of it. I mean, I don't think we can pretend that the quarterback situation didn't have an enormous impact on the team. And, and I wonder, I mean, Malik Neighbors was so good, even given the not great quarterback situation, that like I can't wait to see what Malik Neighbors can do if like we see him do, like, is he that much better than what we saw last year? But even like, that's what I mean. Like the situation was just so not good that you looked at everything and thought like, is that person, better than we thought they were? Would the offensive line have looked better if the quarterback play was better? All of those things go together. You're right. I didn't think the defense was, the defense was not great last year. They added a lot of talent. I just thought everything was several steps below where it needed to be. And listen, when teams get in ruts, it goes south fast, right? Like players know when they are not in it. And I thought you could, like that team was never in it. And it was obvious, and I'm sure they felt it. And this is a much more talented roster that we're going to see this year. And if they get any kind of quarterback play, and I mean, I'm not talking about like Patrick Mahomes doesn't have to walk through that door, but if they get any kind of competent, consistent, veteran level quarterback play out of Russell Wilson, I think they are an improved team. And I'm sure we'll get to this, but the schedule is really, really hard this year. And so I have no idea what the results are going to be, honestly. Like the roster is better. I think there will be better quarterback play. I think the defense will be better. They've got better players on the defense. And I still have no idea what the one-loss record will be.
Right. Now, sticking with the quarterback position, there are some people who say Jackson Dart, the rookie, should compete for the starting job. There are some like myself who say, no, he's not ready. We're probably not going to see him till later in the year, if at all this year. What do you think is the most likely scenario? What do you think the plan is for Jackson Dart and when we might see him?
Well, I think they've been pretty clear about the plan, literally from the night they drafted him, which was they do not want him to start the season on the field, right? They want him to sit and learn. They feel like he's got a learning curve. And they have put veterans in the room with him, which theoretically should help, right? I mean, Russell Wilson is a veteran. He's won Super Bowl. Jameis Winston has been around and has been on a bunch of teams and has won games. So they've put him in a position where they want him to be able to learn. I mean, coming out of college, going into the draft, the feeling was Jackson Dart had a high ceiling, right? Lots of potential, but needed time to grow. And I especially think we have to trust Daboll on this, because this is what he does. This is who he is. This is why they hired him to develop a quarterback. So he presumably knows what he's looking at and knows what is best for Jackson Dart. And if they believe that it is sitting for a while and learning, then I think we've got to trust them. As for when I think we'll see him, I don't know. I mean, obviously we're going to see what his development looks like. He in the off-season program, the little we could see there, right? Like you could see the flashes, and certainly you could hear Daboll's excited about it. And, he said more positive things about him than you usually hear Daboll say about players in public. So that's positive. He's obviously got the confidence and the bearing, that he's certainly not going to be the retiring type who's happy to sit on the bench. He's going to push. He's going to want to play for sure. As to when that would happen, it all depends on how he progresses. What does Russell Wilson look like? Is Russell Wilson playing well? Is the offense playing well? Well, then you don't make any changes. Again, though, that I think the schedule is going to have so much to do with this season. It's the hardest schedule in the NFL by opponent. It's also laid out in a difficult way. Like the bye week does not come until very, very late in the season. I think it's week 14. The first half of the schedule in particular is brutal. And so you wonder if they struggle out of the gate just because of the caliber of opponent, even if Russell Wilson is not playing poorly, if they're not winning games, do they feel the pressure to make a quarterback change? Certainly, the fan base is probably going to want that and probably be vocal about it. I do think, that could be a big test of their philosophy and of their patience. How committed are they to Jackson Dart needs to sit on the bench and be able to learn without the pressure of being the starting quarterback. And it's also going to be a test of like, how fast can Jackson Dart, get up to speed here? Like how soon can he get into a position where he at least gives them something to think about if that's the scenario?
Judy, you mentioned the schedule. It is a difficult one, but especially the first 2 weeks. I mean, if the Giants come out of the gate 0-2 in the division, that's not going to be a good start at all. But that being said, we go back to last year and how John Mara was willing to be patient with the regime of Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll. What does success need to look like, realistically speaking, for Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen to get another year?
I think that's a really good question for John Mara when we next talk to him, because again, I think the team could be improved. I think the team could be better this year. I think the roster is better, but the results may, the win-loss record may not reflect that just because of the schedule. It's really tough, and so I am curious to know what he would say success looks like. I mean, certainly you need to win games. I do not believe there is a playoff mandate. I don't believe there was ever a playoff mandate. I don't think that that's it, like make the playoffs or you're out. But I do think he wants to see signs of progress. And as part of that, I do wonder how much he wants to see out of the rookie quarterback, right? Like, do they want to see Jackson Dart on the field so they know what they've got? Because otherwise, you're going to go into next year's quarterback class. And like, is there somebody there that you say, well, maybe we should draft that guy if you're in position? So I think that's a complicated question that only John Mara can answer. Like, what does success look like this year? Do they have to be above 500? Is that a realistic goal with this team? I don't know. And I would be very curious. I'm very curious to hear what his answer is, because, the season takes a toll on ownership too. And you can always see, I mean, he wears his emotions on his sleeve. You can always see when he's down about the fortunes of the team. But, when you're coming into a new season, everybody's feeling optimistic. You feel like you've done good work in the off season. So I am curious to hear what John has to say about what he wants to see this year.
Realistically speaking, though, do you think the fact that they took Jackson Dart, a guy that Brian Daboll personally had a heavy hand in selecting and is going to develop this year, do you think that maybe buys them another year, regardless of how the record ends up?
It's a good question, because I thought that at the draft, right? Like, do you keep them now? Certainly, again, the reason you hired Brian Daboll was because of his work with quarterbacks, right? I mean, it was his work with Josh Allen and Tom Brady and the whole laundry list of quarterbacks he's worked with. So now you have finally given him the opportunity to pick his own quarterback, right? I mean, this is the first time that they've been able to select their own quarterback. And so do you now say, like, well, you've only got 1 year and basically you've only got however many games it might be that he's on the field. Is that enough? Is that really what you want? And are you drafting a guy, you have him with a coach whose specialty is developing quarterbacks and working with quarterbacks? Do you want to pull that out from Jackson Dart, after his first year? I don't know. I think that's another good question for John Mara is, does that, and certainly, again, I think if we see signs of Jackson Dart developing, and sort of taking off, even if it's at the end of the year and if they're playing meaningless games and he's out there. But I think if you see him ascending, you're probably, I would say the instinct then is to not like make a dramatic change in his coaching. You want him to ascend if he's ascending with the coach. So I think that's another good question. I don't know. I would also, I'm not sure John Mara knows the answers to these questions right now. I think you have to see how the season plays out and what it looks like. And so many things happen in a season that I don't think you can forecast in, July, whatever the date is today, what the season's going to look like. I mean, who knows what Russell Wilson looks like? He could be awesome.
Right.
And then we're probably not talking that much about Jackson Dart being on the field.
This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, the Locked On Giants podcast and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years, and I absolutely love how smooth the draft day experience is and the volumes of information they provide to help make the most informed decisions. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins on August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. Judy, you look at Brian Daboll, the first year he came in, coach of the year, he worked wonders with a roster that was basically broken. The next 2 years, not so much. Was it, and Brian Daboll always talks about processes and sticking to processes. And, when you see back-to-back years where it just doesn't look good, you say to yourself, well, maybe the processes just don't work. Maybe you've got to adapt them a little bit better to the roster that you have. So that being said, given what the Giants currently have, and I know we won't know what the final roster looks like for another few weeks yet, but where do you think Brian Daboll maybe needs to have a shift in his thinking, how he approaches getting the team ready, or just how, he's doing things as it stands?
Gosh, I don't know, and I wouldn't, and I would not pretend to know how coaches self-evaluate and where he thinks his weaknesses are. I think the first year when he was the coach of the year, everything broke right for the New York Giants, right? Like Saquon was healthy, Daniel Jones was healthy, like they got really good performance. Like Daniel Jones just had the year of his life, obviously, and got the contract, which is how we all got to this point. But everything broke right for the Giants that year. And it feels like, even as a reporter, it feels like nothing has broken right since then, right? Like they made this sort of surprising run. They go to a playoff, they win a playoff game on the road, and wow, okay. And then they give Daniel, they sort of, I always wonder if they had not been good that year and Daniel Jones was gone and they don't give him that extension, how much different might the fortunes of the New York Giants be now? But that changed everything. In hindsight, big picture, you always want to go to the playoffs. It didn't change everything for the good. They would be further along probably now if it hadn't happened. So I don't know what Dave needs to change. I do think him working with a young quarterback, though, is in his wheelhouse. And he can have a veteran quarterback who can function in the offense. And then he's got this piece of clay to mold. And that's what he's really good at. And so I think we're probably going to see the best of Daboll this year in the same way we saw it in that first year when he worked with Daniel Jones, when Daniel was healthy, and Saquon was running. I hope that we will see a better version of Daboll as a coach and as an offensive guru, than we've had the opportunity to see the last 2 years. We haven't really mentioned the offensive line, but obviously having Andrew Thomas back and healthy and intact is a very big deal.
I was actually going to ask you about the offensive line. And if, I still have concerns about that unit.
Sure.
I did dive into that unit. They were good last year, but there were some areas they weren't as good. You've got Evan Neal trying to make the conversion to guard. And I'm just wondering what your feeling is about this offensive line, because the other thing is they've been going the veteran route. To me, it doesn't look like they have a long-term plan for that offensive line, because you're going to have guys that are going to get hurt. You're going to have guys that are going to move on. But the backup depth, they've started it with Marcus Bowe, but, the backup depth is still a little skeptical. But what's your take on the offensive line? And in particular, do you think Evan Neal can make that conversion to guard?
We'll see. I don't know. When you talk to offensive linemen, they talk about like these are like making transitions, laymen like us on the outside are like, well, sure, what's the big deal, right? If you played left tackle in college, you ought to be able, I mean, guard, isn't that better? You're not facing the top pass rusher. It's just not like that, right? It's a different skill set. So I don't know. I hope so for his sake. I feel, I'm sorry about the way his career has gone. Obviously, it's been disappointing for him and it's been very disappointing for the Giants. So I hope it works. Um, I agree with you. I thought the offensive line was better last year, right? They've made some progress on the offensive line from what it was, 2 years ago when it was just a, unsightly mess. So they've made some progress. It's not the best offensive line in the league. But it's hard to evaluate last year's offensive line when you didn't have Andrew Thomas, right? For such a big chunk of it. Like he is so important. So I'm not sure we get a fair read on what that offensive line is without him on the field. Depth is an issue. I'll just say this: depth on every offensive line in the NFL is an issue. We saw it. It ruined the Chiefs last year, right? Like they could not figure it out. So, offensive line is an issue almost universally around the league.
Judy, I want to ask you about the defensive side of the ball, and in particular the pass rush, where they put
that should be fun.
Very heavy emphasis on that pass rush. Abdul Carter, they're expecting probably a lot out of that guy who played outside linebacker his final year at Penn State. He played a little bit of inside linebacker, I think, his first couple of years. I mean, this pass rush, what's your feeling about this pass rush, and how do you feel that it might help the back end of the defense, which is improved, but it's still kind of a young unit?
Well, I mean, this pass rush reminds me of like the great years of the Giants defense pass rush when you just had wave upon wave where they just kept drafting pass rushers and we would say on draft like you don't really need another pass rusher, do you? And Ernie, of course, he would tell us, yes, you do. You just keep drafting them. And then you would win Super Bowls that way. This is what that reminds me of, right? They've got 4 just powerhouse guys now on the line who can disrupt the quarterback. I feel like Abdul Carter, for an absolute stud of a player and a first-round draft pick has sort of been overshadowed because they drafted a quarterback too. So people haven't talked about Abdul Carter, but I mean, he should be a terror. And they need that. I mean, look at the quarterbacks they're going to face this year, right? They have to be able to disrupt the quarterback. And they've got so many guys now that, it's the typical situation where you can roll them in over and over. You can't block everybody. They're going to come from all angles. So I have high hopes. Obviously, that also does cover up, if there are holes in the backfield that, can help you if the quarterback is running for his life. It doesn't really matter if the, corner is covering all that well because he's not going to get the ball out fast enough anyway. You hope that's how it works. Until the secondary sort of plays its way in. They did do some work on the secondary this offseason, though, so I think that will be improved. I mean, listen, obviously what you hope for is, again, the way the defense was in those championship years, right, where you were just rushing guys and every guy was terrorizing Tom Brady. And I think they've got the personnel to do it. And now we'll see. And that, let's face it, that also helps the offense, right? I mean, if you can shorten opponents' drives, give the offense the ball back. I mean, that helps if a team that cannot go on like long sustained drives, chewing up the clock. That gives the offense more opportunities. It all works together. And when we talk again about how last year just did not seem right, like all of that played in, nothing was working cohesively.
Yeah, I mean, they really put a lot of love, as I call it, into that defensive front. And in particular, Dexter Lawrence, how he was able to do what he did last year, despite the fact that he was getting literally double mugged every play. I mean, do you feel like they have finally, because here's my take on it, and tell me if you disagree. I feel like ever since they traded away Leonard Williams, they haven't had a really good running mate alongside of Dexter Lawrence. And that's, Dexter's fought through it to his credit, but just think how much better he would be if he had help. Do you feel that they maybe with some of the guys that they brought in, and they did bring in a lot of defensive linemen, do you think maybe they've addressed that problem and they're set up to where maybe they can find a running mate for Dexter Lawrence?
I do. And I think this applies to all guys who are charged with getting to the quarterback. Is you can't just have one, because then it is easy to right? Literally triple team him if you have to. You need to have multiple because they can't, I mean, you can't double team Dexter Lawrence all the time if you're also worried about like Abdul Carter or Kayvon, like it, right? You don't have enough bodies. So it helps all of them if you've got multiples, right? If Dexter Lawrence is the only person out there that the opponent is worried about, that's not a good situation for Dexter Lawrence or the Giants because you can block him. But if you're worried about Dexter Lawrence and Abdul Carter and Kayvon and Brian Burns, like if you're worried about all of these guys coming, again, it is like it used to be where guys would just come from all angles and every play would be different, right? I mean, I can't remember, for some reason I'm drawing a blank, but the guy who got to Brady at the end of the Super Bowl, right, was not like a superstar. It was not Michael Strahan, right? The guy who caught
Alford.
Right.
Alford, wasn't it?
Jay Alford. There you go. So like that's what I mean. Like if you have multiples, it doesn't have to be the superstar every time who makes the play.
Judy, final question for you. I mean, a lot of Giant fans are optimistic. They're excited about this roster. You have some who are skeptical, and I guess that's because year after year you start off, you're encouraged, and then something happens. But what's the one thing that you would say to Giant fans, from your perspective, that don't worry about it? This team is, the tide's about to turn, so to speak.
Well, I think if we see Jackson Dart on the field and looking good and looking like the guy, then I think no matter what happens this season, you can come away feeling pretty good about the future because if he is what they hope he is, he's the future. And so whatever the results are this year, I mean, let's face it. I mean, Russell Wilson and to some extent Jameis Winston are stopgap measures, right? They are not your quarterback for the next dozen years. So I think even if there's no playoff appearance, even if the record is not, if they're not 10-7 or whatever, if you come away from this season knowing that Jackson Dart can play and is your guy, that's probably a successful season.
Yeah, I would say so too. I mean, that's certainly something exciting to watch. Anytime you have a new franchise quarterback, it's
always
watch because it's the sign of a new era, so to speak. But
Right.
we might have to be a little patient before we see Jackson Dart, I would think. But anyway, Judy, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks.
Judy Batista of the NFL Network. She's an NFL Network insider. The NFL Network is providing live coverage of Back Together Weekend this Saturday and Sunday, and Inside Training Camp coverage airs daily, July 28th through August 6th. All right, Giant fans, that will do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. And again, don't forget, keep it here all week into the weekend. If there's a practice and I'm there, you will get a report. So we have plenty of stuff as we go into overdrive here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Hope you will join us. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you tomorrow, Giant fans.